Hi guys, I am teaching a painting workshop in New York this weekend. And as I'm preparing for it, I thought, well, this is probably something I can make a video about. When I do a workshop, a lot of the times I have people send me the references they want to work on in advance so I can help them plan out, maybe a base layer to put down because we won't have that much time together. So, in order to get the most possible work done, sometimes it can help to have a few things already on the canvas and dry. So, people sent me their references, and probably it won't be surprising to learn that, as usual, people were very interested in clouds and water. Those are things that people often want to address in workshops with me. So I was trying to think of a demo I could do to sort of show both of those things in action. So I decided to use this image, and then I thought I would just show you all of the things that I'm going to show them. This is not normally something that I would work from in my own work. I only work from pictures I've taken myself, and to be honest, this palette is a little bit garish for yours truly. But it is a good sort of visual representation of techniques that I use myself with just a lot more subtle color. And I've already mixed some color for this image, and I've taken everything down just a little bit because that's just what I do. This first part is just the base layer, because it's going to be easier to create all of these effects if we already have a base layer down to work on. So a lot of you know I normally like to have a dark brown covering my surface to start with. And honestly, if I was going to make this painting fully finished for myself, I would do that and then do what I'm about to show you today. But it's not necessary. That's just because that's how I start everything. We're just going to go right in with a different kind of base layer. And basically what I'm going to do is below, for the mountains and below, this is all going to be one band of color, and it's going to be essentially something between the color of the mountains and the dark part of the water. So that's going to be underlying this whole area. And then the sky is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to have this kind of rich blue of the sky fading into this lighter color down here. I'm actually changing this color a little bit. This is a little too green for me. So I'm going to actually focus on this area, which is a little bit more neutral pink. So I'm going to start, just because it'll be easier to see, I'm changing my mind. I'm going to start with the sky. So the sky blue that I've mixed, it's a mix of a bunch of blues and their complements. So it is ultramarine, some phthalo blue, black and white, some cad orange, a little bit of alizarin, just a mix of a bunch of different things. I never have blue in a sky without its complement, so just keep that in mind, even in this, as I said, slightly garish palette. So I'm just going to bring in some of the blue at the top, like so. Just filling the space. And this is like the very, very, very bottom layer. So a lot of this is going to be covered. I don't want to get too crazy or tight about anything. Just going to get in here, move things around. So now I have this dark blue at the top. I'm taking a very light neutral color for kind of that bottom area. It's a little bit pink, but it's really, honestly, if you saw it in isolation, it's almost gray. It's really not very bright. So, and I'm just going to work this up and then work on merging the two. Again, it's going to be covered by a lot of things, so I want it to be a fairly smooth transition, but I'm not going to lose my mind about it. Just covering that all. And the horizon doesn't have to be perfect because the mountains are going to cover it, so I'm not being crazy about that either. So now I used this flat brush for this sort of light pink color, and now I'm going to bring that brush directly into the blue and start working these things together. Just making sure I have enough paint. A lot of what I talk about in workshops for landscape paintings, for my kind of landscape, like the bigger finished landscape, which is different than like the Alla Prima studies and stuff I do. A lot of the work is about finding the unifying underlying tones and building on top of them. So that's what we're doing here. This workshop is also focused on color, and I hope to do a separate video for you guys with a different image that will focus more on the color elements that I'll be talking about in this workshop. So now I'm just bringing in the lighter color a little bit more up here. And now I have a dry brush, and I'm just going to move these things in to themselves. I'm going to start with the lights. Probably bring a little more of the pink in. A little more of that pink with kind of a bigger, softer brush. Working that in. And now using this brush to sort of blend up a little bit. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect. I just want this to be a background thing that I can use later on once it's dry and build on top of. Like so. Just gonna soften this out a little bit. And now that. Just kind of going back and forth with these values a little bit. I'm gonna bring the pink in one more time. My blending is shaking the camera even though they are not affixed. The camera is not affixed to the easel in any way, so I apologize for that. Try to stabilize this later. Very gentle smoothing, so that's fine. I can just leave that. This is very sort of soothing, so you may be tempted to go back and forth for quite some time, as I did. Just doing a little bit more. Okay, and now I'm just going to lay in the color down here, which is, let's see, what was in that? So that was ultramarine, alizarin, black, white, yellow, a little bit of viridian green, plenty of ultramarine. It's sort of just a dark, deep blue mix, not bright, just deep. And I'm using the same big brush that I initially used for the bright blue in the top because it doesn't matter. This color will defeat that color. And I might take a slightly smaller brush to get the mountain line in. And this I'm paying, I'm not doing anything specific. I'm just filling in the area with this dark color. almost finished, and then I'll probably, like I said, I'll bring in a smaller brush to do the kind of mountain line. You guys are helping me sort of mentally work out my demo for the weekend, and I appreciate it. So I'm bringing this, just really right up to where I was working the sky. My horizon's probably a little too high, but some of it will be mountains. Actually, because of that, I guess we'll just leave it. Well, I was going back and forth on bringing in a little more of the sky color, so I'll do it. I just need to find a brush to accommodate. And maybe I'll build out some of the, I'm going to build out some of the mountain color this way. And again, none of this, not that it doesn't matter, but none of this is super, nothing's life or death here, ever. But this especially isn't, because there's a lot of work to be done on top of this. Just bring this on through. So I'll maybe I'll use the sky color to build in a little more of a mountain shape, but that's all I'm going to do in this first sitting. And then I'm just going to let this all dry. And we'll go back and we'll do some stuff. And it'll be great. So I'll leave like a little mountain shape there. Okay, that is the first round, and I will come back and we will continue and make a painting. Thanks, guys, for watching. I'm here again to start working on this sky. So the background layer that I did is already dry. Those of you who are very sharp-eyed will see that this is not exactly the same background as I did in the first part of the video. I had to make two of them because I'm using one in a workshop demo on Sunday, and so I just used whichever one was dry first, which I think is not the one that you guys saw me make. But this is very similar. I used the same palette. I had all the colors mixed, so I just basically made another one of the same thing. But if you are questioning my line of mountains, you're right, it is different. So I'm just going to do some of the work in the sky to show you how I would think about doing this. Of course, as I said, if I was doing it for real for my own work, all of the colors would be tones of gray, essentially. But, I know it's more fun for everyone to watch the real color. So I'll post this image in the comments on this because I know that the top of this is a little bit cut off, and that's where I'm going to be working. So I'm going to start with sort of the dark purple cloud color. I've been thinking about what I want to make with this, and here's a speck of dioxazine, a speck of alizarin, just small amounts, and Viridian green. You can also use a Chevenix green. I'm going to get into a little bit of Naples yellow, it doesn't really need to be so dark. So this is still a little bit red, so I'm going to go more into my Viridian. I don't have a sap green on this palette because yellow and black will serve as my yellow shade green should I need it, which I actually don't anticipate needing that much of. I will need yellow, but I don't think I'll need a sap green. So here I am just mixing up this sort of dark purple again because I am Eileen Murphy. I am making it grayer than the picture probably calls for, so I'll just really toss in some dioxazine. And you'll pardon me while I reach over to my paint box to refresh both my Viridian and my dioxazine. They are not my most, I hope you can still hear me. They're not my most commonly used colors, so I sort of just put out a speck, which was foolish because this is my normal, basically my normal palette setup, like as far as the colors laid out go, but this is not the color, these are not the colors I would normally be mixing. So I've also already gotten purple on myself. Okay, so now that this is mixed, I'm just going to sort of knock in the dark tones, and I'm just sort of evaluating a little bit what do I want to do, where do I want to put them. I'm going to use a little bit of medium here because I want a little bit of transparency, and I can do that on top of this dry layer, just so I don't make any big commitments right away. God forbid. Oh God. I'm getting better at really sitting off to the side during these things, but my face is always in the way. I'm actually going to adjust this a little bit because I cannot handle people seeing the side of my face all the time. It's just not necessary. So I have, this is a little bit, this is actually not the blue color I had mixed initially last night. This is brighter. I had really dulled mine down quite a bit. So I made something a little brighter for sort of blending out. So I'm just gonna move this around. I'm just blocking in where I want this to go. I'm not really thinking even about the edges or anything yet. I just want it to be sort of big and cloud-like. And I'm gonna work other tones over it. That's actually gonna be a little more blue. So I'm just gonna mix this a little bit on the brush, bring in a little bit of ultramarine. This is where it gets fun. There's all kinds of colors happening back here. So I have a base mixed, but then I'm just gonna sort of mess around a little bit. And there, bring in some of that sky blue. Let's stretch this out a little bit. This gets a little bit down here, and then maybe a bunch on the side. Just to have this sort of working itself out. There's some stuff happening down here too, so I'll just knock that in while I'm over here. There you go. And now maybe I'll think about making the edges a little more cloud-like. This is an Isabey round brush. That was just a flat Gray Matters brush. And I have a little white. I have a little bit of this mixed blue. I'm just going to sort of, if you see, I'm just sort of using this to manipulate the edges of this and make them sort of puffy. I'm using the round brush so that the edges get a little bit round, which I hope makes sense to everyone. I mean, you don't always have to have that sort of one-to-one response of the brush that you're using versus the edge you want to make of something, but it's a lot of times it's a useful way to think. And I'm just going to take this into the purple and sort of see, I'm just kind of going back and forth, letting these colors, because I just don't want anything to be uniform, and you want different kinds of transparency. So just go ahead and make it however you want. I'm going to soften the outside edge with a little bit of the lighter sky color, which I still have. And then I'll probably bring it back out again with the purple. And everything's just mixing on one brush, which is fine. We're going to go over it with some other tones anyway, so whatever. Mixing this up a little bit. I want that to be a little bit sort of cooler, bluer, so I'm actually going into my Viridian Green a little bit. Messing this around. Etc. So now that these sort of, I'm just going to soften a few more of the edges and then go in with some of the warmer tones. If you sort of lay your groundwork right, it's not going to take much to make this look kind of cool. So I'm all about that. Ta-da. And now I'm going to get into the blue. A little bit of white, start messing around in here, softening the edges, circular motions. I told myself I wouldn't shake the camera tonight, and I think I'm doing a little bit better. Okay, so now we have a little bit of like the base of the clouds built in. And just because I'm thinking about it, I'm cleaning off the first brush I used. I'm just tapping it out in a little bit of turp. And it's still a little dirty. clean it up a little bit. And I'm just going to go a little bit into this brighter blue that I mixed and sort of, there's my face, oh my god, work that in. I feel like you probably can't even see that that is different, but it is slightly. Okay, so now we'll bring in a little bit of the heat. I think actually before I do that, I am going to, I don't know if I'm exactly mimicking the clouds in the sky in this picture. It doesn't really matter, obviously. So this is a little bit more of a blue-based cloud. Oh, I didn't put any black out. Oh my goodness. I will be right back. I had meant to. So here, I just had a bunch of lessons today and I was like, I'm so caffeinated. I definitely still have time to work on this video. But a few things seem to have fallen by the wayside. So I'm going to get into the black a little bit. Just sort of, really just, you know, tossing colors around now. Stretching that out a little bit. Trying to use a motion that will mimic the motion I want in these clouds. Okay, now I'm going to think a little bit about that warm color. And for that, let's go into white, a little bit of Naples yellow, cad orange for sure. And this can be bright because the color that's already in the clouds is going to knock this down, and there is blue in that. So I don't want this to be, I'm not going to follow my natural inclinations to dull everything down. Add some yellow. I want this to be a little bit yellow, but not terribly. I might go in again with a yellower layer because the yellow will mix with some of the blue in the clouds and get a little green. So I want this to be a little more orange centric. I'm actually gonna see. It's fair. I'm gonna separate this and make this part a little bit more straight cad orange because there you can see there's spots in the clouds where the orange and the blue kind of mix at the edges, and this is going to be the color I use for that. And actually, for those areas, I might even try the same brush I've been using because I want this stuff to mix a little bit. We'll go in with something purer too, but maybe initially we do this. Just kind of laying that down. And I'm taking, this is just a dry round brush. Itself. And it's another rounded brush. I'm going to bring the purple back in a little bit. So it's just like back and forth. It's a little dark, but I will fix it. Like so. And this brush I feel like is a little bit big for what I want to do. It's the purple, this is the dry brush. Just a round dry brush, like I said. Smoothing some things around. Letting this blend, because I'm going to go back in and make it go in with something brighter, but this can blend. Just touching this around. Keep confusing which is my dry brush and which is my purple brush. I'm going to reaffirm some of my purple, sort of in these areas. Mixing in a little bit of blue. Just working on little transitions. I'm going to just sort of pull things down with my dry brush. Now maybe I'll get a little brighter. And let's see, I'm going to take a different brush. Maybe a little bit smaller. This is a Grey Matters Filbert. I'm going to go into that slightly lighter, brighter pile. And here, you know, if you're really trying to change the value from what you've put down, just remember, you can't brush your brush back and forth 100 times without recharging it. You'll get like 1 or 2 bites of the apple, and then you have to go get fresh paint because you're just picking up the paint that you like, the purple that's behind this paint. I just keep picking it up, so I got to keep going back to my pile, and I tap it out a little bit, and then I pick up some new paint like so. Now here's my dry brush again. Just, I really don't want to get into the interior of this paint because this is my brighter color, or at least not far into the interior. And I don't want to lose all this brushwork, so I'm just sort of working some things out on the edge. And the other thing I want to do is go right into my cat orange a little bit and bring some of that in up here. Here I'm sort of finding the mark I want to make. This is a little more like what I wanted. Sometimes you just don't have it right away, but it's okay. You can just keep going and hope it comes. Usually does. Not always, of course. Just gonna tap this out a little bit. Letting that mix with the purple. Purple and cat orange mixed together just makes a really nice warm purple. Bring a little darkness up here. Fade that out a little into the sky. Maybe I'll just move that around a little bit. Going into my dioxazine a little bit. Just letting things move, be a little fresh. Now maybe I will take one more clean brush. Think about adding a little bit of yellow to this. Sort of having this be brighter and sort of peeking out here. Again, I can only do so much before it'll start to turn. Sorry, I had to adjust over there because I didn't change my settings. And I'm just going to bring this out. I'm going to bring a little more of the purple up this way. Let a little of the drama happen. And you don't always see all the things that you need to do right away, so that's fine. Just do them when you see them. And we're getting to the time when the dry brush will be no longer a dry brush, but relatively corrupted. And then we'll just find a new one. I'm just going to bring the purple back in. I'm sorry, the blue back in here. Letting that all mess around. Go into a little bit of some of my lighter colors. Back into the blue. And now, I'm going to take a big soft brush and just let it do a little bit of work here. And here's another dry brush. And this is the lighter color in the sky. I'm just going to sort of move this in here. And I'm going to take a different dry brush that's going to be like my light dry brush, because my other one is quite purple. You can keep using them, you just got to keep in mind that like sometimes for different color families you got to use different things. into my light color. This is my leftover light pile from yesterday. Just sort of letting that kind of trail out. Maybe I'll bring a little yellow underneath it, like real yellow. Oh, it's dark. There's the sky color again. So it's just, you know, back and forth, let it all blend out. And here I'm gonna, maybe I'll bring in a little bit of the blue into a little bit of this color for sort of this area. And I'll want maybe a little bit of a clean dry brush for that. I feel like I have like 4 dry brushes going already, which is a lot. And then let me see what's happening here. Maybe there's some, use this brush that's so yellow, but I'll make it pinker. Go in there, get a little pink, go into this. Because I don't want it to be, it's going to get green pretty easily with all that yellow on it. So maybe I'll just do a little bit of like little touches up here. And maybe this can like fade into the purple. This brush now has everything on it. Fade in a little bit. Go back to my other dry brush, which is no longer anything related to a dry brush. Sort of just, I'm sort of just trying to let these effects create themselves. And I'm going to take a small round Richardson brush and sort of move these guys out a little bit. They were a little too emphatic. This way they can sort of fade into the sky a little bit. You know, maybe here, I'm going to take this smaller brush and maybe I can make like smaller marks. Yeah, you want to start pretty general, but then you can just kind of nerd out on this. Like so. And now I'm holding 100 brushes. Some of that is just because I'm trying to keep this speedy for you guys. So, but also sometimes I just do that. And I'm going to bring a little bit of the blue in here. This corner could be, oh, I was talking while I was doing that and did not see how light that is. Also, this really could be, so much for my blue brush, this could be kind of a purple corner. It sort of is. And here, I think I will take some of my lighter. I'm just doing just basically a big orange mix right now. Here's some maples. And just bring some of this out. I'm going to kind of attach it to that other blue cloud in a second. But first I'll just get it here. I actually like that color, so maybe I'll bring it there too. And I'm going to go back. This brush is maybe a little big for what I want it to do. This is that sort of background color again. I'm just using, it's a flat brush, but I'm using the corner of it to sort of pull out the clouds into the background sky that is dry. Like so. And now my formerly dry brush will sort of help me merge these two. You know, and maybe I'll still drop in a little bit of this here. I'm going to bring a little variation in here. Bring some dark purple back in here. And you can just, at this point it's just deciding where you want things to be. Here's my smaller brush, smaller dry brush. You know, and you want to watch out because things can get real muddy in these situations really quickly. So here I will also take another small brush as I look for the right one. And this is just a small basic round brush. And just build in, sort of do a little bit of back and forth on this. Just softening it in. And I'm going to bring in some real sky color in here because it's a little muddy for me. Just and I'm not finishing any sentences, I realize that. Here's some sky color, here's some of this. Just lighten this up with a little bit of just bringing this back and forth. Keep saying it. How much purple do you want? How much of the warm color do you want? And let's see. Let's get pretty orange now. Because this is such a green-blue cloud. It's going to mix, but the orange will do the best, have the best chance of protecting its own value. And then I'd also like to bring in some purple back here. Can't quite get to the edge of the painting because of where the palette is. And now I'm going to go back into my yellow. Again, just kind of drag this out. Getting a little heavier, which is fine. It's good to be moving some paint around. And I'm going to just take this. It was a dry brush, but I'm going to just protect it with a little bit of the sky color that'll help me just move this out a little bit. And add some of that sort of shadowy dimension. I'm going to do that a little bit up here too. I'm gonna bring some orange back in here. Might be a little too much. Knock it down a little. And then maybe I'll just do a little bit of that on the edge on the other side. And some orange at the bottom and we'll be good. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to get to this side of a painting without blocking everything you're seeing. And I'm just really tossing this color in, because that's what it looks like is happening to me. And this sort of continues, which is kind of what I'm after. Keeping it pretty orange. And we'll get in here. It's getting a little lighter with the sky color. And it doesn't matter if we run into the mountain line, because we're going to be putting that all in later. I might do it tonight, we'll see. And then up here, you can see I keep waving the 900 brushes that I have in my hand. Working this around. And my formerly dry brush, I'm going to also do that. And now at the edges I want them to be yellower. And lighter. Transfer some brushes around. Oh, my nose is in the painting. Ta-da. Okay. Maybe I'll connect these a little bit, maybe I won't. Bring some yellow down here too. And then here, do a little blending. And I'm sort of gonna, because I have so much paint on this brush already, I'm just gonna kind of bring this over here to be the gray. And I'll add a little body to that with some of the background sky color. Connect these two, I think they want to be. Letting this do the work of blending some of the edges of the clouds. You could definitely use a round brush for this. This is just a flat brush that I love because I know how to use the corners of it to get what I want. And you can get a really great, it might be counterintuitive, but you can get a really great circular motion. Reestablish that. Background color and blend this a little bit. Create a little bit of that softness. I'm going to do that over here too now that this brush has color on it. Sort of bring this as a transitional gray, which sort of happens closer to the horizon line. And I just want to soften this transition here. Do a little bit of smoothing, general smoothing, where things got a little bit heavy. just touching. Still limiting some of the ridges. I don't always do that, but in this case, because I was working so quickly, in the interest of not boring you guys, I left some ridges. And I'm just going to bring in actually even a little bit of white here, because this brush has gotten dirty and so has this area, and I can just sort of have that in and kind of clean it up, and also pull this into that cloud and then bring that cloud back out with this very dirty brush. You know, at this point, at a certain point, you're totally within your rights to just leave your reference behind, basically, and respond to the painting that's in front of you. I'm always telling my students to do that. Like, we want to have allegiance to maybe reality or whatever you want to call it, but you can also make your own choices and ignore your reference at a certain point. Just connecting a little bit of this. And just going to knock that down. And maybe I'll do the water tonight, because then it'll be, I'm sorry, do the mountains tonight, and they'll be dry when I want to do the water. So I could sort of just use a mixture of my blue and the purple, but I'll make more because there is very little paint there. So we're going to bring in some ultramarine. That's a big part of the story. A little bit of the cat orange. You know, I just can't make things too bright. Maybe a little alizarin. And just to lighten it a little bit, just kind of bring in a little bit of everything that I have mixed on the bottom. You might not even be able to see this as I lay it in, because it's not going to be very different than the color I have on the water. But it's really going to be a little bit lighter. That's what I want. I was just making it a little bit more purple by adding a little alizarin and dioxazine. Okay. So I'm not even cleaning that brush. I'm just going to go in. That was kind of my blue brush. And this is darker. This is not the right brush, really, but I'm going to loosen this paint up a tiny bit. A little bit of medium. I actually thought I would use a lot more medium than I've used. This looks really purple next to the sort of green shade blue I have underneath the water, but it's fine. Just giving it really small variations. And I might tape off the water line later, we'll see. I also might not. But it might be a cool thing for you guys to see. God, this is too purple for me. Hang on. I'll just go straight into some yellow. Just had to knock it down a little bit. Couldn't deal with it. And I'm just going to make it a little bit kind of lighter grayer on the other one, because they are a little bit back in the distance. Okay, I think we're pretty well set up for next time. So I hope that was helpful, and I will be back with the water, and we'll go from there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to this cloud and water exercise. I am very excited to do this part, which is the water. There are a couple of ways that I could do this, and I'll give you a little bit of an alternative as we go along, but I'm really just going to be painting in these ripple effects in the simplest way possible. Um, and the reason it's going to be a little easier than you might think is because we already have this dark background. So all of the darkness that you're seeing in the water is already done for us. So now we just have to make some of the shapes around that darkness. And painting water is really fun, so I'm excited about this. The first thing I'm going to do, which is something that was a revelation to me when I discovered it back when I was painting, making paintings of interiors, is that masking tape comes in different sizes, different thicknesses. So I have everything from masking tape that's 1/16 of an inch all the way up to 2 inches. So you can get a really, really thin roll and tape off very little things if you want straight lines. So I was too lazy to actually dig out my 1/8 inch masking tape. So I think this is a 1/4 of an inch masking tape, which is still pretty small. And what I'm using this for, I'm going to move the palette out of the way a little bit. What I'm using this for is to tape off my horizon line, because that way I don't have to worry about keeping that straight line and keeping the paint for the water out of the mountains. So that's going to be on the canvas the whole time I'm painting the water. So that is going to save you some time, because it just saves the time of and energy that would go into protecting the straightness of the line. And then when we peel it off, it's going to be just an incredible reveal, guys. Okay, so a couple things going on in the water. Something to keep in mind: as the space recedes, your marks are going to get, as the space recedes in the image, your marks are going to get smaller. That's the only reason we know that the water towards the horizon line is farther away from us. In reality, we can read the distance of this picture because of, the blueness of the mountains indicates atmospheric perspective, and the change in the size of the ripples of the water. They get smaller as they get closer to the horizon line. Because aside from that, you're really just looking at 3 tiers of stacked space. There's the water tier, the mountain tier, the sky tier. And so it's just these little indicators. There's not that much information telling us that this is not a flat image, that the image is receding away from us. And we're used to reading photographs in that way, but it is useful at times to, when you're looking at an image, to think, okay, what is it in this picture that's indicating to me that the space is receding? Because you can decide to manipulate that. I'm always interested in paintings that depict 3-dimensional things flatly. That can be those can be really wonderful paintings. So just be aware of what you're deciding to do and how and why. But the colors here are pretty simple. We're going to deal with sort of an orange reflection in the middle, slightly darker orange over here, and this is sort of on the sides we have sort of a mixture of ultramarine and cat orange as things sort of mix in the water, in the same way that the purple and the orange pretty much mixed in the sky. If I was going to do this for myself, I might honestly paint all of the water in the orange kind of reflection color and then glaze in some ultramarine on top. But you don't have to do that. You could. It's pretty easy. But in this way, I'll just show you that you can sort of do everything all at once as well. So, enough talking. Let's talk more paint. Okay, I'm just going to grab, let's see, I'm going to work on the brightest orange reflections in the middle. I'm going to grab some white. I'm going to grab some cat orange. I will probably need more of this on my palette, so let me just make sure it's nearby. I always forget something, but yeah, it's right next to me for when the time comes. So this is white and cat orange, and just because none of the reflection is that bright, I'm just going to bring in a little bit of ultramarine, which is the complement to cat orange, and also there's sort of an overall mix of everything in this image is sort of mixing with ultramarine on some level if you look at it. So it's just a safe bet to go for the ultramarine. Gonna make it just a little bit richer and maybe a speck lighter, maybe not. And I'm also going to throw in a little bit of cad yellow extra deep. You can also just use yellow, which I also kind of just ran my brush into, just to give it a little more body. Cad orange really is quite warm and red, so I just want to have a little bit of dimension of something a little more towards yellow orange in here, and you can sort of decide what you want that to be. I'm actually going to do, now that I'm thinking about this, I'm going to do something that's going to seem a little bit nuts because I already have this background color all in. And what I'm going to do, just to, because with this rippling that we're going to do, it can be nice to have a layer of something a little bit loose and wet already underneath a very thin layer. So what I'm going to do, which I had not thought of before, but I do think is the right way to go, I'm going to grab a big brush and I'm going to, in this case, I usually use artist painting medium from Winsor and Newton. But because I haven't used any medium yet on this painting, I am going to use a medium that I'm wrestling around for right now. It's from Chelsea Classical Studio and it's called their Lean Medium. And it just has a lower oil content, so it's not as it's not going to create as much shine. And normally with medium, it's great to have shine, but there's no other medium in this painting, so I don't want the water to be that much shinier than the sky. The word for your surface in painting is called facture. So if I had one very shiny half of the painting and then one very matte half, that wouldn't be great. You can always afterwards go in and varnish. In this case, I would use a retouch varnish, because if you're going to use a real varnish, you have to wait at least 6 months. You really should wait a year, believe it or not. So anyway, I'm in my lean painting medium. So you can see how loose this is. It's so much of the medium and so little of the color. It doesn't really matter how dense it is really because you have this color behind it, but I just kind of want to just make things a little bit loose and liquid under here. I just want to give a base to work into. So if you've seen any of my other Alla Prima demos, either on here or the ones I put on Instagram, you can see sometimes I go over things with this loose layer of I don't know, burnt umber, raw sienna, whatever. And sometimes I just think that's nicer than working on a very dry panel. And so that's what I'm doing now, basically. This is just sort of a thing I enjoy, creating a little bit of movement, or creating the ability for the brush to move a little bit more easily as we do this sort of liquid motion. And this is the kind of thing I can't give you, this is just a thing I've felt works over time. I can't give you any science to it. I just think it is more efficient at times if you're going to make a lot of repeated brush movements to be doing it over a slightly looser layer of paint. And that probably, I think that's pretty intuitive. So now I'm going to start with my smallest marks in the background of this painting, and I'm thinking about my brush choice. There are so many to choose. Now, I have a chisel brush here. This is from Princeton. It's from the Princeton Select series. A chisel brush is just a brush that has a little bit of a slant at the top. I'm actually going to switch to a slightly bigger one. You wouldn't think I'd be using a brush this big for this kind of background, but here we are. And I'm just going to go in here. And also, I will warn you in advance, because I have not practice this in any way. I've painted a lot of water, but I haven't specifically painted this water. And every time I pick up a chisel brush, of which I have several, I'm always okay, now's the time to use a chisel brush. And then I'm I can't make it work. So we'll see how this goes. But the nice thing about this is once I load it up with paint, it gets very flat. I'm going to try to keep my face out of this. And so I just want the small implication of marks here. Yeah, that might actually work. And I'm just using this sideways. I'm not using this as like doing any like proper chisel-y things with it, which would be making like a very dramatic mark that's bigger on one side than the other. So this is probably hard to see, so I'm going to try to keep this quick. And the other thing that's happening about the reason I thought to put the ultramarine down is because I was mixing it into that orange, and I was like, okay, there's going to be a little bit of this ultramarine kind of everywhere in this painting, in this water, which I believe I said out loud and didn't just think to myself. And then, if you see that kind of tone under everything, I could mix it individually into every color that I made, but why not just sort of lay it down and work on top of it? And that way it'll mix itself unevenly, which is actually what I want. That's actually what I'm seeing in the image. So like now whenever I recharge my brush and touch it to the canvas, the first marks are a little more orange and then it fades out a little bit, and that creates a really nice natural effect. One thing about having the tape down is you have to remember that when the tape is not down, you do not have, if you don't make any kind of line at the edge, you're not going to have one. So that can be great. There can be a lot of like implied edges that way. But here I want to make sure I'm actually working some of this orange really right underneath that that tape to be sure that when I pull it away, it doesn't all just sort of fade off. Because there is a firm end to the water on the horizon, as anyone knows who's seen the ocean. So just to let everyone know, I just realized I made a mistake because I am working with this bright orange, which is really only in the middle, and I started on the side like a moron, but that's easily fixed. I'll just go over that with the ultramarine. But now just know I'm going to be kind of spending more time in the middle as I should have initially. But also, like, if that happens, don't get bummed because you can always, 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 always fix everything, as I will do. And also, I can blame the fact that I'm talking or whatever, but, sometimes you just mess up. Going right into the cat orange here just to get a little richness. I'm actually going to squeeze out some more cat orange. My tube of cat orange is quite aged because you really only need very little at a time. But it's also, because I've had it so long, it's also pretty stiff, so it can be hard to get out of the tube. And this is Old Holland cat orange, the only cat orange that I want to know about. Okay, and now right into the cat orange again. Now I've got a bunch of the ultramarine and the orange mixed on my brush, so I'm fine with using a little bit of the orange directly because doesn't look like cat orange out of the tube because it's mixing with all these things on my brush. Now I'm going to go back into my mixed orange and just bring this, just staying in this middle section, not going all the way over to the side. And so the spaces that you're leaving between these marks are, the dark sides of the ripples, and you don't have to give them too much attention. They'll sort of just make themselves. And here, sometimes I'm pulling down a little bit to just give a little bit of different shape to what's happening. Like so. And pulling like up and across a little bit. You might notice, this happens to me all the time, you just end up making the same mark or all your marks have the same directional pull. And just, try to be aware of that. Because like mine all list a little bit one way or another a lot of the time. So just keep an eye out for it. It's not a problem. You can always just repair whatever's happening. So I'm going to stick with this middle section. And I have a bigger chisel than this, but I actually think just by changing the way I use the brush, I can use this brush the whole time, which is not what I anticipated, but it's great. So I'm going to bring in a little more regular orange. So I'm moving closer to the viewer now, the viewer being me, being you, being whoever. And so now I'm going to just start making a little more of a motion, not emotion, with like a bigger motion with the brush so that you get the feeling that you're seeing these little waves more clearly because they're getting closer to you. And that's a big part of what tells, like I said, what tells the viewer that the horizon is farther away. So up here, all the marks I'm making are really close together. And there's not a lot of the dark ripple color in between. And down here, there's going to be more of that because it's closer. We can see it, as I keep saying. You see more, you're closer to it. And then, as we get closer still, I'm going to start paying attention to, like, there's a slight, very close to the horizon, I'm very close to the viewer, there's a slight sort of sideways action you can see. So I'm just building that in, leaving more of that dark space, basically. And here I'm kind of striking the brush on the one side and pulling over a little bit. So I'm getting a little more of a wider mark on the left side. And if you saw these brush strokes blown up and in isolation, they would look very abstract because they are. And it's the context that's telling us what is supposed to be implied here. And I'm going to leave a little more space over here with the ripples too. Keeping it very simple. I could do this for like 3 weeks maybe, making really tiny, even marks. And you can do that too. It's great. It's very exciting to do that. It gets very meditative. But what I'm doing here quickly is the basis for that. I would just be doing the same thing with more detail and more care. And there would just be more mark making if I was to do this in one of kind of my real bigger paintings. But it's the same technique. So, once you sort of understand the simplicity behind a lot of those tiny marks, I think they get much less intimidating. And people are always like, I don't have the patience. And there's some patience required. There's some. But, when you understand that it's really not as complicated as people think, which is what I'm always saying, then I think it seems more attainable, which it is, I think. Okay, we got some water happening here. See, it doesn't take that much for you to start reading it as water. And you can see I didn't quite go straight down. So actually, let me pull this out a little bit. Try to even this up a little bit, because there's not like a hard end to where the reflection is more orange or anything, but I'll just give it a little bit more kind of a straight up and down feeling, and it's going to sort of fade out. Okay, so while I'm in the orange, I'm going to go into my cat orange. I'm going to go into my burnt sienna. Burnt sienna and cat orange are incredibly related. They are members of the same family. Cat orange is much brighter, but they function. I use the two of them to sort of function in the same way in a lot of situations. So let's see, let me get over here. Basically just going to do the same thing, but this is a slightly richer, darker orange, because you can see these clouds are sort of darker, so this is also dark. And I'm just gonna do the exact same thing I did here. There's a little less variation in this color. I'm gonna probably bring a little bit of maybe ultramarine into it, but it's mixing with the ultramarine, but there's less, I should say fewer value differences than in the middle section. So here, because I'm close to the horizon line, I'm just making these really small marks. I'm actually going to lay in a few more because I'm a little farther away from this area, so I was being a little bit quick and imprecise, even though this is like a quick and imprecise method, which is why it's great. Just keeping my brush moving around. Got to recharge a lot for this because we are working wet on wet. And now I'm starting to create a little more visible motion as we are closer, getting closer to the viewer. Starting to leave, well, not quite up here. I'm going to fill this in a little more. But as soon as we move down, I'll start to leave more of the darker blue as to act as the underside of the ripples. Imagine trying to do all of this at once when you're making your orange marks and your blue marks. You could do it. You could for sure do it, but you know, this is really simple. And there's so much that the viewer can sort of fill in for themselves. And again, if you want to go nuts and do this for weeks on end, I strongly encourage it because I think it's good for all painters, even if that's not the way you end up working, just to try it once and see what the downsides and what the benefits are. I think the benefits are all mental. Like I said, it's a sort of working meditation. Speaking as someone who's never properly meditated, at least that's what I assume it is. I'm going to bring in just a little more color down here. And you know, see these little marks just read as like ripples that are sitting a little higher in the water. You can do that forever. Okay, bring this over a little bit. And now I'm going to think about the in-between areas, which are sort of a mixture of the orange and ultramarine. And there's already some ultramarine down, so I don't want to go like too insane with that. And I'm bringing in a little burnt sienna too. That'll help dull the whole situation down. And here's my ultramarine. And this is all going to be just like, we'll mix as we go, essentially, because I don't want it to be super even. You know what? I'm changing my mind, actually. I want to use some of this because I want this color to have a little white in it, so it has a little body to it. So I'm going to take a little cat orange. So what I changed my mind about was kind of mixing as I go, because I'm going to actually make a pile of it. That's good. Maybe I'll add a tiny bit more ultramarine, which looks like I actually added more orange. Mix that up. Do I need to add white to that? No, I think I'm going to leave it like that. I think that's going to be good. Yeah, we'll go with that. We'll try it. All I can do is try it. So let me just get in here. So this is the area I messed up, so I'm going to be real light here. I think that's still too orange, actually. I'm going to do more of this. Sometimes you don't know until you get it up there. More of this, a little bit of white. And that's better, I think. I thought it was good last time, too, so don't trust me. I'm going to clean off the brush a little bit too. It had a lot of orange on it. Okay, let's try this. And now I'm going to bring in just some straight ultramarine and see what do I think of that. It's better. So now I'm just mixing the mixed color with a little more ultramarine. And then I'm going to bring the ultramarine just directly on top of some of the marks I made when I started the orange on the side accidentally. And it's all mixing. I want to be clear. I'm not like really putting direct tube color on this painting because it's all mixing on my brush. But I just want the ultramarine to be a little bit dominant. So here I am back here trying to keep everything smaller, make smaller marks. And I'm just being careful about this connecting area between the orange and the blue section, that it's smooth, because the ripples don't change. It's just the light is changing on the ripples. So I want to be sure that my marks are a little bit consistent. I'm going to go into that mixed color. So it doesn't look like one area really stops abruptly or starts abruptly. I'm going to bring these smaller marks over, letting the ripples happen in between. And here as I move down, I'm also bringing in a little bit of more of an up and down motion. Like the top marks are flat because you can't really see the individual action of each of the ripples. But here it's a little more, making a little more of an arc with my hand. Like up here I was very straight. Now I'm making more of an arc. And just letting everything connect. Or not. And now down here, as we're closest, I'm going to bring in kind of the biggest arc and letting all the marks have a little more roundness to them. And you can sort of go back over, connect them a little bit. You don't want a solid mass of this color, but you can have it a little more solid too. And all I'm doing, you can see I'm doing very little, but it looks like water, which is the whole point. Just gonna get back up here. I really want to knock this all down a little bit more. I want more of a division between this section and this section. So ultramarine will be help be my barrier color. Maybe a touch of phthalo, which I may live to regret, but get it in there a little. Yeah, we'll knock that down a little too. It stands out. If you look around and anything really stands out and it doesn't seem like it's standing out for a reason, you can just go ahead and knock it down too. Keeping everything close together. Moving this around, connecting these two different areas of color. And now that my hand knows the marks a little bit now, I'm moving a little quicker, which happens a lot. You gotta in the beginning when you're trying things out, it can take a while to have your hand settle into the mark, but once you do, you can sort of cruise a little bit. You gotta make sure it doesn't get too rote, you're not thinking about it, but it tends to get easier, which is great. Again, just leaving this space for the underside of the ripples. Like so. Let me bring a little out there. Yeah. We have water. Didn't even take that long. Wasn't that hard. And in the foreground, maybe we can get a little bit you can go back in and refine. Do you see I'm just making some of it a little bit wider? Some of the marks a little bit wider, a little bit swishier. And maybe do the same thing over here. You know, that's the thing. Once you have your basic marks down, you can kind of get in and really enjoy this part. This is the real fun. Using the chisel a little more widely. And like, so I'm smushing it and I'm getting a bigger mark on the right side, which is very water-like. And I'm only doing that closest to me because you do not want to do that farther towards the horizon line because then it's not clear, like, well, why can I see that much of that? Why is that ripple so prominent? That's so far away from me. I mean, think of how far the distance of this water actually is from one side to another. It's far. It's far. Okay, I'm going back into my straight orange now. I'm going to bring it into this lighter color because I want to do a little bit of that, like, extra accent work here. It's a little bright, but a little bit more. Just going to bring a little bit of interest to the bottom with a little bit more orange. That's pretty good. Maybe I'll do a little bit of that dark sienna, dark orange. That's good. Okay, I'm going to go back in the ultramarine one more time. Knock down the mistake a little bit. The mistake area. And the other thing I can do also is I'll bring a little of the orange here in the horizon line because that'll make it a little more even. And no one needs to know that the actual image is not like that. Okay, that makes a little more sense now, I think. And I'm just going to bring a little bit of lightness here just to make sure this horizon shows up. Okay. Just a few more finishing touches. And I think, oh, you know what I gotta do? I'll show it to you without the tape after I make this one last mark. Okay. I'm surprised I did that all with one brush. Another brush I like to use for water is the Princeton Select brush that I use all the time, the bristle pointed filbert. You can do, if I was really going to take a lot of time to do this the way I might do it for my own big paintings, I would probably use that. So the tape is off. You can see no damage done, just a nice horizon line. And I might, while I'm here, I think I can use the chisel for this maybe. Just out of laziness, really. Let me get into the ultramarine, of which I am low. A little bit of this blue, maybe. Actually, this is probably more purple. Just clean up my edge here a little bit. And then maybe this a little lighter. Clean up that edge. And this was blocked by the palette, so I can just bang that in real quick. And then fix that mark I just messed up. Okay, maybe I'll pull this down. This is me again, it's like at the end of every video and I'm like, I'm done, and then I just keep going. But I think that's pretty good. So I think that gives you some water and sky, and I'm gonna just bring a little more light in over here. So you can see these are really, really, really simple techniques. You can, nerd out and make them as intense, as labor intensive and detailed as you want, but you don't have to. You can really just imply a lot of things very easily and have it not be some crazy endeavor. So I hope this was helpful. It really helped me prepare for the workshop I'm giving tomorrow, because I'm going to talk about some of these things as well as other things. So I thank you guys for letting me clarify my thoughts in this way. That was really helpful, and I will see you next time, and thanks for watching.